Hey, Jennifer, you're trying to talk to us. Looks like you're still on mute.
Thank you. Yeah, I just looked at that. I was like, no one's responding to me. That's so strange. So it looks like we have all 5 of the District 1 board members. And we have Brandon and Chris, myself, Jennifer Ivy, Shelby Clymer, Brittany, and Jerry. So I think we're just waiting for Kelly Lead is joining right now. I think the only other person we're expecting today is Bruce. I just want to give him, let's see, looks like it's 2:02. I'll give him yet another minute, and if not, we can go ahead and get started. In the meantime, Shelby, I'm going to go ahead and make you the host, so just watch for Bruce popping up. And Jason, someone, I think Josh was mentioning that you were available to go to the clubhouse if needed for the 3:30 meeting.
Yep.
Just so you know, Brittany is there, so you are free to stay at home in your sweatpants if that's where you are.
How did you know I was wearing sweats?
Because we all do these days, right?
That is impressive.
Because that's what I have on underneath all of this, right?
Do we want to give Bruce another minute or so, or do we want to?
I say let's get started, and he can pick up. I think we have Kelly, myself, and Chris from District 4 on.
Okay, sounds great. Jennifer, do we need to do any formal calling?
No, so we can reconvene the meeting officially.
Right, because we never.
Yeah, we never adjourned. So this is a continued meeting. Directors matters. Those were filed for the last meeting. This is a continuation. I don't think we have any members of the public unless anybody just joined us other than board members as they are members of the public for other districts. So I think we can jump right into financial matters.
Okay, awesome. So real quick before we jump in, I wanted to note there are obviously changes to District 4 budget that we will discuss. There are some changes to the District 1 budget just to kind of update based on the most recent financing plan for that refinancing. Those numbers will continue to those may be adjusted kind of once we have the pricing, which I believe is scheduled for November 10th. And then I wanted to point out that we did not make any adjustments to the budgets for 2, 3, or 5 from the initial study session that was back, I think, towards the end of September. So I'm happy to go over District 1 if needed, but I think the primary focus today is going to be that District 4 budget. So that said, let me find this page. Okay, so for anybody following along, the District 4 budget starts on page 33 of the packet. Looks like Bruce is joining us too, so. Okay, so I believe we've kind of gone over the general presentation of the budget in the past, but just as a kind of refresher. So this page here is the summary page for the 2021 proposed budget. This pulls all funds together. So the general fund, debt service fund, and capital projects fund. We will spend really our time on the individual fund pages, but this just gives a complete summary and overview of the complete budget. So looking first at the property tax summary page. So no changes to this page from the last time that we met. The assessed valuation shown here at $550,000 is based on the preliminary assessed value received from the county. We will receive that final assessed value for all of these districts towards the end of November, and we'll update the budgets and then the mill levy certifications at that time. As a reminder, the mill levy here is remaining consistent with 2020 at 77.928 total mills, of which 22.265 is for general and O&M. So just for District 4, this generates property taxes about $12,200 for general fund and just under $31,000 for the debt service fund. So getting into our general fund budget, and certainly I would just say to Brandon and Jerry along the way, as you have things to add or additional details, please just feel free to jump in. So thanks, Brandon. Focusing primarily on our 2021 budget column, looking at our revenues. Again, we have about 12,200 property taxes, 612 for specific ownership taxes, very small amount for interest income. We have right now a developer advance in here, 200,000. Clubhouse rental, 3,500. Other income right now, just over 90,000. This really kind of represents an amount that is kind of still to be determined. And as we kind of talk through the expenses, I think this will bring more to light. But just as we continue the conversation of funding mechanisms, both for 2021 and moving forward. COVID-19 relief funds, these are just anticipated reimbursed funds through the COVID relief funds through the state. This 30,000 has corresponding $30,000 in expenses below. We're budgeting 13,000 for design review fees, and then we have the transfers in from districts 1, 2, 3, and 5 for the net property tax collections in the general fund, bringing total revenues to about 785,000.
So Shelby, let's pause on that for just a moment and talk through the revenues, because I know that there was some changes, I guess, from our last budget workshops and sessions and some of our budgets over the past couple of weeks. So let's just visit on this for just a moment and talk through the some of the approaches that we were looking at as we were going through the process over the past couple of weeks. And I think that generally, Kelly and I, visited with Jerry and Shelby and other board members of number one over the past couple of weeks. We've had multiple conversations. First, looking at all the expenses and kind of categorizing all the expenses into their specific categories, kind of segregating the capital expenses versus the operating and maintenance expenses and repairs and so forth. And we took a hard look at, other benchmarks. I think, at prior conversations, we dove into details on Colliers, just as one example. And, we're more willing to look at others, but we did focus on Colliers as just one benchmark, understanding that it's not the, the end all be all benchmark, but it is one source of data. And we just looked at that in terms of, I guess, where expenses were and where revenues were and so forth. So we arrived at a recommendation, I guess, of the developer advance of $200,000. And we suggested that, there's another line item for other revenue at $90,000. And as Shelby mentioned, it's yet to be determined what that other revenue, how you get there. But I think it's a discussion point that we would like to continue to have in 2021 as we move forward to what that may mean, and what the options are.
Can I ask you?
I wanted to leave it at kind of, just introduce that and leave it at that, and, just, I guess, open it up for some discussion points.
So I do have a quick question about that, Brandon, actually about the 200,000. I know we're using Colliers kind of as that guiding point, but what objective data did we use or did Oakwood use to kind of get to that number as far as the amenities that they provided for the districts, the turnover schedule for the districts, the 5-year total cost of ownerships, and breaking that out based upon our saturation rate of the neighborhood as a whole? So what objective data was kind of used to get to that 200,000?
Yeah, and so I'll point to a couple different items. One is, we did look at Colliers. We looked at the the builder fee revenue for Colliers for lots on ground. That's one point. And comparably, I think $200,000 would be a fairly comparable mark for Colliers in that regard. I think the other data point would be the build out of the community, as you mentioned. So let me go to some of the numbers that I've looked at over the past few weeks. So total number of home sites within the community is planned to be 800 and let me see here, 868 in Erie Highlands. And so the remaining filings that we have that Oakwood has left to construct are filings 14 and 15, which is going to be the Meridian product and the Carriage House collection, as well as a proposed townhome collection as well. So with that, it's the data that I have looked at is about 480 closed homes to date, and I think the county record showed about 473 as of
Yeah, we're showing.
30.
Looks like we're showing 474 at the moment. Is the last thing that I pulled.
Yeah, and I think that's county records. I think through closings to date is about 480, and so remaining home sites left is about 388, and roughly that's equivalent to about 45% of the community. So it's about 55% built out right now. And I think looking at the budgets and how that relates to the budgets, and how that relates to the 200,000 developer advance is one way to look at it. Is that $200,000 developer advance, is that appropriate? Is it reasonable for the build out of the community? And that question has been posed by you, Jason, and Josh, and others. They want to understand, is that appropriate? And at 55% of the build out, it may be appropriate, and I think that's up for further analysis and discussion. But I think it's just a starting point in terms of the conversation.
Definitely be good to kind of start with that, because I mean, if the districts are putting in 434,000 and we're only halfway built out for the total of the community as a whole, I would kind of expect for the builder to be matching that other half of the needed revenue to come in and complete what's needed for keeping the maintenance up and going, knowing that you're going to be sliding out, like having a true agreement, not just we're looking at 200,000, anything like that. Like I want to look at what's needed to have an agreement. So at 2022, 2023, we have a sliding scale that can be looked at and to say, hey, this is the Oakwood responsibility of these fees and charges. And I think that would kind of help clarify all these things, because I mean, this other revenue at 90,000. What are your thoughts around that, Brandon? What are your thoughts to get that other revenue in the door?
I think that the other thoughts, as we talked about in the past, are you've got a couple different options, not many options, but you do have a few. I think it either comes down to an adjustment of the mill levy, imposition of a fee, or developer picks it up. I'd leave it to Jennifer or Shelby or Kelly or anyone else really to talk about if there are any other options, and then kind of those three kind of main items at this time. But I think those are the three that we probably need to identify.
All right, sounds good. Because I see that we have that other revenue at 90,000, but also when I went through and compared the current expenditures that are on this report versus what we talked about in the past, there's still an additional $400,000 worth of expenditures that aren't even listed. That's not even included with that 90,000.
Right. And
so I think we really should kind of dig into that as well, because it's on that revenue piece is definitely a big part of it as well. But then that level of service, those expenditures, kind of going over how we plan to explain to people, hey, we've cut janitorial service out of the clubhouse, that we've cut replacing trees, things along those lines. But I mean, if we're looking only at that other revenue at 90,000, but we've still already cut $400,000 of necessary services, that's going to be a big talking point. I think we kind of need to have in today's meeting.
Of course, and so let's just jump into that right away then. So Kelly and I and Jerry, we talked about that other piece, which is what you're referring to as kind of what we wanted to identify as a capital expenditure piece, and that was one of the initial discussions that we had in the last budget workshop, was to identify what of the dollars in that preliminary draft was capital expenditures, and I think we identified that. And we asked Jerry to take a look at, what does that look like? How can we phase that in over the upcoming years? And Jerry came back with a proposal to, phase it in of $90,000, roughly $90,000 in the first year in 2021, and then following years after that. So, as the budget's presented right now, it does show $90,000 as an other revenue piece. With the intent is, also to add another $90,000 on top of that to, pay for that first phase of of the capital kind of projects that has been previously identified. So that's about $180,000, if you want to call it that. And if we'd like, we could show that, and I think that's a discussion point that we should have if we want to show that full 180 in here, and then show a line item for capital projects within this of another 90 below the line in expenditures, understanding that we want to try to get to the 180, and that's, I think, it's a discussion that we should have as well.
Yeah,
Shelby, excuse me. Shelby, I was just going to quickly ask, for as far as percentage of overall development assessed value that's actually flowing into this. I know Brandon was saying 480 closed homes, but is it the assessed value from that 374 that are currently feeding into fund revenues of District 4?
So it would be anything as of January 1st. So any additional kind of homes built in this year are not included in the assessed valuation at this point.
Yeah, so it's really a number less than 480 homes that are currently feeding this budget, because the first year they come into it, they don't come in at residential value, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's at best the districts are, by my math, 43% developed from a tax revenue perspective.
I also just throughout this conversation want to kind of remind the group for a mill levy increase that would require both a service plan amendment as well as a Tabor election. So, that I think, I don't know if Jennifer would agree, but some kind of big hurdles to jump through in order to get that done, which we would not be able to accomplish for 2021 budget year. For the fee piece, if that is something that's further discussed, we would need some level of approval from the town. And Jennifer believes that would likely need to go to town council to kind of go through that approval process. So just wanted to remind the group of the constraints with either options.
Yeah, thank you, Shelby. That's exactly what I was starting to get down the road, is what those limitations are. The district service plan does cap the operations and maintenance mill levy at 20 mills, subject to adjustment for the Gallagher amendment, and also has a restriction, I think, that we touched on in one of our previous study sessions, on the ability of the districts to charge fee, requiring them to go to the town for approval. It doesn't specify what level of town approval, but we have talked to the town in the past about various amenities fees, and the town attorney has told us that would be something that would go to the Board of Trustees. Additionally, as Shelby said, when the districts were formed, their Tabor authorization questions tied to the service plan limitation at the request of the town for the 20 mills. So even if the town was willing to amend the service plan to allow for over 20 mills, you would still have to get a approval of the voters, which does require everyone that is a voter in the district. I mean, over 50% would have to approve that election.
So this is Bruce. I was just going to jump into the conversation for a second, and I obviously was not part of the budget workshop you guys have, so I apologize if my comments are a little bit out of time, but I think it's important to note that the way these districts are structured, different from Colliers Hill, where you're dealing with an HOA, there is no direct correlation between unit count, closed units, and developer obligation or builder obligation. And I'm not trying to argue that there isn't some component that Oakwood would still contribute here. I'm just identifying that is true. The secondary thing that I want to make sure everyone understands, and I apologize, I wasn't sure who was speaking a minute ago, or I'd address you directly, but Oakwood also pays substantial property taxes in the district. And so if the analysis you'd like to understand is the relative contribution of revenue in the year 2021 to the district's operations, it's a more complex analysis than just adding up the total number of closed homes and dividing it by the total number that would eventually be built. You actually also have to look at anticipated assessed valuation, because the payment by unit varies based on the value of the home. Home sites that are owned by the developer pay, uh, I think it's about 4.5 times the tax rate that a home pays. And as a result, a finished home site or even a partially finished home site pays nearly the same property taxes as a finished home does. Now, obviously, there's not a large quantity of those out there. There's a whole series of different status points in terms of where things are in the district in terms of development. But I just want to identify that it is not a linear calculation. If that's something that's important for the boards to understand as we enter into these discussions, I think it's important to actually do a thorough analysis on that, rather than kind of throwing darts at it. So.
Definitely, I would agree with you on that piece, Bruce. Do you currently have any type of calculation to come up with that developer advance then that is based on objective data?
Uh, I haven't. I mean, I'm just listening to the conversation you're having and trying to provide objective feedback as to the proposal that's being made.
Okay.
So
Yep.
if you were asking me to do that, we can certainly have CLA go do those calculations. It's data that's available, right, and understandable.
Yep. I think I'm in the same point you are. I just looking at it from a very objective standpoint of these amenities were created by Oakwood, turned over to the districts. Districts are expected to upkeep them, but knowing that, hey, we're not that full build out, I think there should be a very clear and objectified cost of ownership associated with that. That way we can, moving forward, that Oakwood knows where they stand on maintaining and releasing those amenities over to the districts, but at the same time, the district knows, hey, we can't expand outside past this point. So I just kind of having that objective view. So if you had those data points to kind of help and guide in that, if you know if there's been any calculation that's guided that in the past, would be very helpful. But I think that should kind of be where we steer this meeting or steer next year into as well, is that moving forward, any items that are handed over to the district have that cost of ownership and a sliding scale associated with it to say this is how much Oakwood would pay on that item per year and or per saturation rate, and have that kind of identified. So as we budget out for future years, we know what comes down to the districts versus what comes down to expecting for the closure of the neighborhood.
Sure. I think I understand what you're saying. I think if that's a request in terms of the data analysis that we'd like to make of CLA, they are certainly competent to do that. I'm not sure that I'm in 100% agreement with you on the proposal you're making, but I understand it.
Okay, no problem. And then I think another big important part that we should probably guide to as well is what is the the process in which items are handed over, amenity service items are handed from Oakwood to the districts.
I think
Like,
the amenity that's in discussion here is actually an amenity that was constructed by the district and has always been owned by the district. That's not the case with each and every facility. The others are primarily landscape tracts that have been completed by the developer and handed over to the district for maintenance.
well, I'm just thinking things like the sidewalks out there on Erie Parkway. Those serve no homeowner currently. They're there on the outside. They are completed, but they've been handed over to the district already. I'm wondering, do we, as the districts, have the ability to say no? We are not financially stable at this point to obtain and take over any other items until we come to a solvent state. I mean, we're looking for 90,000 in revenue. There's nothing else that we should be looking at even taking over from Oakwood at this point in time, correct? Would the districts kind of agree in that?
I think that's your point of view.
Oh well, so I'm sorry, Bruce. I'm not trying to argue or do anything. I'm just trying to come up. How do we get physically solvent, and how do
Sure.
we make it so that there is a cost of ownership associated with everything that comes in the door that we continue to move forward? I mean, we haven't even gone through this line items yet. There are multiple line items that have been removed from our expenditures this year, and I mean, playground equipment and maintenance has been stripped from the expenditures. Landscaping repair has been stripped from the expenditures. Plant material replacement, trees replacements from the 42 or 40 some trees that have been killed out. So these items have been stripped from the expenditures. If we can't, as a district, maintain what we currently have, why do we need to take over more?
Jason, I think that's what we're getting to, that analysis that you referred to. I mean, we've identified over the past couple of weeks some objective data. You're looking at a full, probably more detailed analysis than I could provide with the data that I have at hand, and that Shelby could provide over the past couple of weeks. And I think we've talked about doing a third-party analysis of what it looks like, the build out of the community, and also what does that mean in terms of the equivalent fee or levy that is appropriate to get to a stabilization. And I think that everything that you're talking about is the intent and goal, of a developer that is, and a builder, a master plan community builder. This is what we do as a, is to build out master plan communities, and there's a process involved, and we want to make sure that the community is financially stable moving forward, and that's the process that we need to go through. And I think in 2021 we will identify that. We've talked about doing that.
Okay.
I think for the budgetary purposes, we've put some numbers that I believe are appropriate for this point in time, identifying that there still are some gaps in there that need to be covered.
Okay.
So.
Yep. No, that sounds good. And I know I jumped around a bit, so I do apologize on that piece. I think let's move forward, look at the numbers. I would like to have an explanation on things that have been removed from there. And yeah, so I think it would be good to go ahead and move forward.
Okay. So I think with that conversation, it's certainly the appropriate conversation to have at this point in time. And, I think there's a lot more work to be done, at just call it 55, roughly half or more than half of build out at this point in time. And so with that kind of as a framework, let's jump into the expenditures and we can go line by line, and Shelby, you can take us through that. And, I think that, Jerry, if you can provide as much detail as you can and address any questions.
Okay. All right. So first thing I wanted to point out, Brandon alluded to this, we did do a little bit different kind of groupings or categorization of expenses here, expenditures. So we have 4 separate sections at this time. We have general and administrative costs. So those are really primarily your consultants, insurance dues. We have district operations and maintenance. So that's primarily kind of landscaping, snow removal. And then we have clubhouse and pool operations. So just wanted to point out that those groupings that we have.
Sounds good. Can I jump in real quick, Shelby, and ask a quick question for the G&A? Sorry.
Yep.
So the previous G&A was at 283,000. We've now come to 228 with 2 new line items of the reserve study and the I'm guessing contingency might also be a new item, but I'm not sure. But we're short 54,976 in that. Where did that go from G&A?
So, Jason, hopefully my calculating skills weren't off here, but I totaled the G&A expenses to about 288,000, which is just about the $5,000 higher than what was initially presented, and that's the result of adding that reserve study line item.
And that could be completely the case if I mistyped last night. It was around 10 o'clock when I was going through these, so give me one quick second. I do apologize.
And Jason, while you're doing your math,
yep, I must have. Yeah, you're correct. I did mistype last night.
No worries. It happens.
Shelby, if I could chime in and ask really quick, are all of these budget numbers for 2021 based on discussions with the respective service providers? I recognize some of them, like treasury fees, you don't need to talk to anybody. But as far as legal, accounting, all of those type items, have the appropriate professionals weighed in on that budget?
Yes. So myself, Jerry, and Jennifer kind of all looked at our budgets to make sure that those 2021 amounts seemed appropriate based on, kind of historical information and the services we're providing to the districts. So those are the 3 largest line items in here. The other kind of larger items, insurance, we did increase there. I think that we just got the insurance proposals there, so I would need to look at that to double check against this number, but we did factor in an increase there. And then auditing is kind of the other larger item. And the current auditor that we use generally doesn't raise his fee from year to year. So expect that we'll continue to be at that 14.1. So we did, make sure that we feel these are all in line.
Thank you.
Okay, so kind of just went over that. Are there any other questions on G&A? Again, that section alone totals just about 288,000 for the budget.
Well, let me just pause here for a second on G&A. So I think we've talked to each one of Kelly and I, and we've talked with each one of the consultants as well, and we to go through the scope of services and understand it in a lot more detail, and we didn't make any proposed changes to that at this moment in time. We can obviously keep the conversation moving forward in terms of what does that mean, but we have to understand, I guess, what the trade-offs are, and if there is any opportunities, I guess, for decreased or reduced or efficiencies. We're always willing to investigate that and understand that, and keep track of that throughout the year. So I'm not sure if you want to add anything to that, Kelly.
No, I mean, nothing to add to this specific piece, but no.
Okay. And more than willing to entertain any other conversations with any other board members from other districts, in regards to these items as well.
I mean, as I've shared before, I think the other piece of this is not just looking, in terms of the work we've done to this point, but I think going forward, being really clear about us collectively tracking some of these expenses against the budget, right? Well, I mean, we do that as a matter of practice, but I think for purposes of transparency, and I'll give you an example: clubhouse landscape repairs and maintenance, tracking those on a monthly basis, working with Jerry and his team, so that we're providing updates to the rest of the board members, so that you can see in real time, like us, how those are evolving, or if we have a variance, being able to talk about that at the time versus the process we've done to this point, where we're doing it retrospectively, so that we'll be in a much better place next year in terms of tracking some of these expenses against budgeted items.
So maybe let's just allow maybe a minute or two, I guess, for each of the consultants to kind of walk through kind of quickly, I guess. Shelby, if you can just speak to the kind of the general categories, and a lot of the accounting functions are, compliance related, for specifically for metropolitan districts, and maybe just touch on kind of the major categories that you have.
Sure, I'm happy to. So for the accounting services, kind of the details that we had provided, we do monthly processing of bills to pay all of our vendors. So we do that on a monthly basis. We do kind of account reconciliations each month. So that's reconciling the bank accounts for all 5 districts, kind of doing property tax revenue reconciliations. And part of what drives that process is that under the bond document for the applicable districts, we are to transfer pledged revenues on a monthly basis. And so to do that, we need to do the reconciliations, make sure that those numbers are correct before making those transfers. We are currently preparing monthly financial statements for the districts. And that's, again, kind of adding on to the reconciliation process that we're already doing. We do quarterly continuing disclosure filings right now for districts 1 and 2. Again, another requirement under the bond documents. Those filings do require quarterly financial statements to be included with those. We, of course, do the annual budgeting process with you all, the annual audits and or audit exemptions for all 5 districts. We do also 1099 filing. I'm trying to remember if I listed anything else on there. But as Brandon had mentioned, the majority of the services we're providing are, kind of required either under bond documents or just under special district law. So any questions on the services that we provide, or any further detail you guys might want?
I guess my question, Sam, my question would be, what is the difference between that and the district management line item? It seems like district management and what you just described are the same thing.
Yeah, Jerry,
let's allow Jerry to go through, I guess, the scope of services next, and then that'll speak to, I guess, the differences. So Jerry, if you would kind of go through the categories, and major scope that you perform on a weekly, monthly, annual basis.
Sure. Yep, I can do that. So as district management, we attend all of the special and regular meetings along with all the other consultants and the accountants. We do work with CLA on the budgets, projections, vendors and other consultants who monitor the monthly invoices. We assist the boards and CLA in the preparation of the annual budgets, which was what we're been doing the last few weeks. We also assist in preparation of any supplementary budgets and any accompanying documents as requested. We do review the monthly accounting and financial statements provided by CLA for accuracy, future projections, budgeting exercises, capital expenditures, and the debt and O&M mill levies. We monitor and code all the invoices for payment, do permits and fees for all 5 districts. We also assist the auditor as needed in performing the annual audit. When they need information about the development, we can supply that. So we do, we work with Oakwood on the development information, and then CLA does the financial piece for the auditors. If there's any construction oversight, we fulfill that role as the district's construction manager, monitoring, managing, and reporting per the service plan on any capital construction. We assist as needed in the final acceptance and turnover of any sanitary sewer, water systems, and streets to the town. We monitor the process for all stormwater invoices on any impervious surfaces owned by the district. We manage and maintain and repair the district's assets, such as district-owned fencing, parks, pocket parks, playground equipment, trees, structures, streetscape, common area, drainage facilities, and utility easements. We are the facilities manager for the clubhouse and the pool, and all the operations, maintenance, repairs, events, fitness programs, rentals, grounds, landscaping, parking lot, signage, snow removal. We also, play a hand in the budgeting, billing, payment, and collection functions. We manage all the utilities provided to the clubhouse, pool, parks, playgrounds, monuments, common areas, and similar facilities. We assist in the conduct of the regular and special elections and appointments. We coordinate, review, and manage and approve and deny all design review applications for all exterior and architectural improvements within Erie Highlands district boundaries, commercial and residential. That includes initial residential and commercial applications, variance requests and applications, hearings, appeals, site inspections, special meetings as it relates to design review and architectural reviews, landscape escrow inspections, refunds, forfeitures, and covenant control and community management. We do hold regular meetings with the community management company to review inspections, reporting, variance, training, lien filings, enforcement policies, escalations, attorney collections, foreclosures, work orders, website content, and overall state of the community. We work with Jennifer's firm on any intergovernmental agreements between Erie and any other districts, as well as resolutions for Erie Highlands. We're the point of contact for all resale information requests, including status request letters, district documents, financials, minutes, review fees, liens, collections, etc. We coordinate and manage mapping for the district ownership and maintenance responsibilities. That includes landscaping, fencing, irrigation systems, streetscape, parks, pocket parks, viewing areas, snow removal. We prepare and maintain the infrastructure mapping of the improvements for when streets are getting transferred, sanitary storm systems, drainage, water, landscaping, and fencing, so that we know what's coming online and the timing of that. We manage the landscape contracts, the irrigation system management, maintenance and repairs, water supply, Erie Highlands parks, and pocket parks, monumentation, and native area management. We also manage all of the landscaping improvements that are transitioning out of the developer warranty over to district ownership, including securing developer documentation, plans, plan review meetings, construction drawings, as-built, irrigation designs, landscape designs. We come up with the punch lists, do the initial and final acceptance walks. Then we also collect the district acceptance documentation and provide maintenance contracts, snow removal, plant material replacement, and bidding and awarding. We're also the community liaison between the residential homeowners and the district for all community issues and items. We also manage and process, track, and monitor all the landscape escrow forfeitures that are due to the district. So there's kind of somewhat of a detailed of what the district management does.
Sam, you'll see that there's a lot of coordination. There's a lot of coordination between Timberline and CLA and Eisenagel and Jennifer's firm, and there needs to be that coordination, but there also is some very separate scope of work. And I think as we move down the list in terms of as we go through each of the line items, I will ask Jerry to kind of comment on each of the contractors that are performing those duties. So Jennifer, if you want to touch on, I guess, kind of major scope items, I guess, from your perspective.
I was gonna say, don't I get to bore you guys to death with all the legal nuances of things that I work on?
Hey, Brian, I just wanted to jump in for 1 second. I think it's helpful for me to think about the district manager as sort of the business manager for the district, and the accountants as their outside contract or consultants in this situation, but they'd be the same position as your in-house accounting firm, and then we separately have audits. So very different roles between operations, management, and the accounting bookkeeping function of that.
Yeah, great point.
Yep.
So yeah, happy to, generally speaking, I do all of the legal work for the district, other than when bonds are issued, we bring in special counsel if there's ever litigation. My firm doesn't do litigation. So that includes, attendant meetings. We draft the meeting notices, the agendas, the affidavits of posting. We coordinate with Jerry and Brittany to make sure those meeting notices are posted, and with the town. We draft the minutes for your meetings. We do everything related to directors. So oaths of office, certificates of appointment, filings with the court and the state, any sort of publications related to those. We do the conflict of interest disclosure statements that we are always harassing you about. Make sure those get filed with the Secretary of State in the district. We prepare all of your annual and election resolutions. We also prepare the budget resolutions in consultation with CLA and any other basic resolutions that are needed from time to time. We review and draft all of your contracts. We do all the paperwork and conduct of uncontested regular elections of the district. We monitor legislation throughout the year and produce a memorandum that the district receives, just summarizing what legislation has passed. We also do all of your annual compliance items, which include a laundry list of things like your map filings with the county assessor, county clerk, the treasurer. We make sure that your contact information is up to date, your transparency notice is regularly updated, that any agreement list filings are done with the local division of local government. We prepare your annual reports and file them with the town, not the county. And we review your budgets, your audits, your everything, make sure everything is filed with appropriate people, check all the boxes, and make sure you're in legal compliance all year long. So I'm sure there's things I'm missing, but it's a high level overview.
So with that high level overview, any questions, I guess, for Shelby, Jerry, or Jennifer? Okay. Well, I think it's appropriate to kind of move down a list of the expenses and dive into the details in each line item, and Shelby and Jerry take point on that.
I will do kind of a brief overview, and then Jerry, if you can jump in with detail, that'd be awesome. So
Okay.
Next section here is district operations and maintenance. Again, this is, largely kind of landscape maintenance, snow removal, irrigation repairs. So this section here totals about 212,000. One, I guess fairly significant change from the prior draft is snow removal. That was bumped down to 50,000. I think in the initial budget it was at 95,000. So that 50,000 is really based on, kind of, again, historical data, where we have been kind of year to date and in the past couple of years. Jerry, do you?
But excuse me, but that's still significantly higher than last year's budget in actual. So how did you come up with that number?
So what we did is the district has taken on the new responsibility of the spine trails that go around the perimeter of the development, as well as Erie Highlands Parkway, those additional trails. So we've more than doubled the linear feet of snow removal that the district is responsible for. So that's where that increase came from.
And Jerry, what was the trigger for that becoming our responsibility?
It was out of warranty from Oakwood's original installation and construction.
And Jerry, can you remind us what actually triggers? So from the installation, like, what is our agreement for that takeover? Like, where do we have that documented for that takeover piece?
So typically what happens is Oakwood, as they move through development, they will construct the improvements, the district improvements. Once they're done, we do an initial walk, generate a punch list. Then they move forward on resolving that punch list. And then we do a final walk at the 1 year point, generate an additional punch list if needed. And then once that punch list is completed, we do a final inspection. And then that's when we take it over as a district responsibility.
So at that 1 year point is when we take over all items from Oakwood then, basically, or that process kind of kicks off?
Yeah, I mean, once the install is completed, that's when kind of the process starts. Once we do our initial acceptance and it gets granted, then that's what kicks off that 1 year warranty period. So then, just as an example, if we go through that inspection and there's a large list of punch list items, then that delays putting that particular improvement into warranty until we get until we're satisfied that the punch list is getting resolved.
And Jerry, this is Kelly. The basis of that assessment is based on the plans and specifications for the installation of whatever that improvement is.
That's correct. Yep. And that inspection is especially the final inspection is not just done with us. We also have the landscape designer there, as well as the irrigation designer, to make sure that everything that was installed was per the plans.
And then Oakwood, when these items are coming up, you are constructing that piece. What is the rhyme or reason to have a piece start off? Like, what is that guideline and expectation for the community improvement of that? Like, how does that kind of line in and informing the districts that something is oncoming?
Sure. Generally, the driving requirements for the construction of those components is a requirement of the city that goes along with the development. And obviously, the residents benefit from those improvements. I don't believe we actually had a specific trigger on the clubhouse in this community. And so then it was really driven by, timing when, the expectations being met of the homeowners in the community. It's a kind of a balancing act, right? I mean, it could have been built later, it could have been built earlier, but certainly I'm sure you could find residents on both sides of the equation that would have preferred one or the other, but it wasn't a specific timing requirement from the city.
Yeah, and once again, I just kind of go back to the landscaping that's going along Erie Parkway and just the lack of residents that are in that area. So the reasoning for that kind of being built, and then hand it over for us to maintain the watering, the landscaping, and the snow removal in that piece. So
that requirement comes from the town.
That came from the town. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I wanted to figure out on that side of it.
Yep.
All right. And then, so that kind of goes over, or the main change was snow removal, but a couple other items I have for you on that, Jerry. And landscape maintenance, we're at 70,000. Originally, we had planned out 69295, but items that I see that are located to landscaping as well that have no longer in there are like landscape repairs. Um, let's see here. We don't have landscape repair, concrete repair, monument maintenance, native area maintenance, or tree replacements. Where did those end up moving to?
Shelby, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think those got moved into the 90,000 capital enhancements. Is that correct, Shelby?
So yes, and for this budget that we have here today, all of those items have been removed as of today. So kind of that Brandon had mentioned earlier that Jerry had kind of taken those initial landscape enhancements and some of those other kind of capital repairs and did a phased approach. And then, you know, again, as we continue the discussion on funding and revenues, those are currently pulled out of this budget.
So then I guess I'm kind of confused because our total revenue, including that other revenue, was 785, and our current total expenditures is 780. Correct?
Correct.
So if those items were removed and included in that 90,000, then how are we still only 5,000 under our revenue?
Oh, I'm sorry. I think I misunderstood the question. So the phased approach came out to about 90,000 in 2021. That's the 90,000 I was thinking of. That doesn't necessarily correlate to that other revenue of 90,000.
All right. And well, and so that would be that phased approach. And then what? So I thought the phased approach was looking at the replacing the landscape enhancements that were along Long's Peak, the clubhouse, where all the mulch is showing. We no longer have topsoil, things on those lines. So where did that line item move to then? At the 181,000.
Yeah. So Jason, currently in this budget that we're looking at right now, those were all pulled out of this budget.
So those were pulled out of this budget. So so landscape and repairs is been completely repulled. So someone ends up going through. We just had an incident actually a week ago where a driver ended up going in and hitting the grass on the sidewalk that now has to be repaired. We don't have the budget to take care of that.
So I do want to point out, and I know Jerry can add more detail here, we do have this other repairs and maintenance line item of 30,000, which I believe incorporates items just like you mentioned.
That is correct.
So Jason, the approach was to, and I think we talked about this in the original budget workshop, to categorize, kind of the ongoing operations in a separate line item, categorize the, kind of the larger capital expenditures in a separate line item, and keep them separate so we can, so we can understand how do we get to a stable operating budget, on a yearly basis, and then identify what those capital needs were. And I think we talked about that phased approach of that $90,000 was in that first phase, and currently it's not in this budget and it's not in the revenue. And so I think that's an item that we will continue to work on.
So we have the other at 30,000. So 30,000 by the original breakdown was plant material replacement and fence repairs. That still leaves landscaping repairs, playground equipment maintenance, tree replacements at 42,281. So the dead trees that are already in the community that still need to be taken care of, native area maintenance, monument maintenance, which was at 4,000, and then concrete repairs. I'm sorry, I should have probably been running a calculator when I was doing that, but that's still a significant amount, and I think that's actually even more than what the 90,000 was if I'm just kind of, well, no, probably around a little bit under that 90,000 now that I'm looking at it. So those items right there, are you basically then telling community that we're not going to have those for 2021, Brandon?
Jason, I think
or not you, but this piece. I want to make sure that when we need to answer questions to the community, why services are not there, why dead trees are still in the community.
Let me reiterate.
I just want to make sure we can kind of have that.
Yeah, let me reiterate. The $90,000 that we've identified as a phased approach is not in this budget. If we need to get it in this budget, we need to find that as another source of revenue. So that would be $180,000 as another source of revenue if we wanted to add that $90,000 capital expenses. So we are we want to work with the boards and residents to identify what that means for 2021.
Okay.
And we want to go through the process to understand what the alternatives are to get
That
there.
that sounds good. And then so we're looking at 180, and then that still doesn't address the issues of the missing mulch, the landscaping that hasn't been maintained since it's been put in along Highlands or Long Street Drive, the clubhouse, and the parks, Bonanza Summit, Highland Circle, and those areas. So there's still that 180 as well. So now we're looking at the 180 for the standard work that we're doing,
How
and then
about
the
we? How
secondary
about
180 for
Jason?
that phase. So
Jason,
I'm just trying to get a good
Jason,
understanding of that piece.
Jason, how about we let Jerry talk through, I guess, the phase approach, because I think
Okay.
all those capital expenditures were in one big bucket, and we asked Jerry to take a look at it, what it means to do a phase approach, and I think as we move forward, we can identify if the phase approach is appropriate, what is appropriate in that first year phasing, and what is appropriate for further down the line. So Jerry, if you want to kind of start that conversation and go through, I guess, your thought process for that proposal phase approach.
Yeah, give me 1 second so I can pull the breakout up here.
And while Jerry's pulling that up, I am not meaning to rush anybody along or anything like that, but it is 3 o'clock. We do have a hard stop at 3:30. We can always continue this discussion, but the Erie one board members had a pre-existing meeting for their bond issuance at 3:30. So at 3:30, we will have to decide if we're done with this for today, if we want to continue it again, but we will have to be done by then.
And I think to answer Jason's questions, I mean, at the very first joint meeting that we had, the workshop, I think it was Bruce that said, this is a non-starter and the number's too high and we need to come up with it. And we set up this working group to basically make those hard choices as to what stays and what goes. And this is the result. Now, if we want to start putting things back, I think we obviously had that capability, but the original charge was get this down to a number that makes sense without having to do too much in terms of raising revenue, which generally means taxes. So, I mean, that's where we are, and we're just going to have to make those value judgments and hard choices.
Yep. And so, Sam, the reason I kind of bring these up are that these line items were items that were on the budget and marked as needs. And I just want to make sure that we can properly explain to the community why they're no longer there. Also, in the original budget, Oakwood is marked as giving $800,000 as their developer advance, and now they're down to $2,000. So how do we objectively quantify that their advance when they're only at that half build out, but then we're eliminating close to $400,000 in services from the community?
No, I don't mean to be argumentative.
So, yeah. I know. Yeah, I'm just trying to. That was my mindset of it.
Yeah, I'm not, like I said, I'm not trying to be argumentative. I just want to set the stage, remind everybody why we are where we are. I don't necessarily disagree with you at all.
So Jason, I would add that that original draft budget didn't have Oakwood input in terms of a developer advance, and that's, to Bruce's comment, it was a non-starter.
Yep. And I think that kind of just keeps going back to my main point of what is the objective data to drive that developer advance. I think that's kind of where we need to get to. But once again, we're not going to get on this meeting. It's why I keep repeating. I want to make sure moving forward for 2022 and so forth, we have an objective calculation. So that way it's next year when this needs to happen, it's not the feelings can be completely removed. All revenues can be associated for, and it's not going to be a guessing game of what the powers Oakwood feel they need to pay into the community, but more along the lines of, hey, this is what we have as an agreement for how we're going to move forward. But yeah, I just want to make sure we kind of clearly outline where did that $200,000 objectively come from? How did you come up with that number? And we can cross that bridge when we get there.
So to give some detail on the landscape phase approach is what we did is we took, what we considered as capital enhancement, and I broke it out into 3 sections. One would be the first phase, which would be next year. And there is a large percentage of the tree number was in that first phase, as well as the improvements on the mulch throughout the community. I used the bark mulch numbers because they were significantly lower than the transition from bark to rock numbers. So I put those costs down at the bottom as a future conversation. So primarily in phase 1 was the enhanced bark mulch throughout the community, tree replacements, and then 50% of the native area enhancements as well. And then everything else slid into phase 2 for 2022. And again, the third section was the rock mulch conversion for a future conversation.
Okay. And then, so what are our plans if something breaks down at the playground, since it seems that's not included in that phased approach, and maintaining the current playground, the one in Longs Peak and the new one that just came up over in the circle area?
So I think the plan there is it depends on the situation and the amount of the cost for repairs. If it's something minor, then I think, it's appropriate to put it in the other repairs and maintenance area. If it is something significant, like $5,000, or say a car runs through a fence and it's going to be a $7,000 repair, I think that's where we go back to the board and, make them aware that we have an issue that is going to put, no matter where we put it in this budget, it's going to break the budget. And so we need some guidance from the board as to how we want to go about, getting those funds.
Right. And Jerry, this is Kelly, and Jason answer, that is what Jerry just described is a typical process, even municipalities go through as they build their budgets. If you allocate a certain amount or an allowance for a certain thing, and I'll use your playground equipment as an example, what Jerry just described is exactly what would happen, right? If it's a minor, 5,000 or less repair, you go make the repair. In some cases, you might even go get bids to get the most competitive price. And if it starts to go over a threshold, let's say $5,000, you come back to the board. You might reallocate other categories based on an underutilization of a certain category. And if it's even bigger, then you go in and have a larger conversation about a revenue enhancement or some other means to cover that bill. And I think the important part of this is that, and this is true for anyone, is that not only is how is that repair or maintenance item being handled, but what's the protocols, what are the steps one takes so that the residents understand the transparency of that transaction to get it fixed. So that's the other piece of this, and then the third piece is that level of service that we keep talking about. So those are the component parts of having a dynamic budget like this.
So that's the phase approach. And so let's get into the details of line items if we could. So at this point.
Yep. So I'll go ahead and get started on landscape maintenance. So the services that is provided, this is a base contract. That's what is in the budget showing there. And that's for mowing operations, trimming, edging, general cleanup, aeration, spring and fall cleanups, fertilization program, there's 4 applications there, and a chemical weed control, there's 4 applications there. General tree and shrub care, irrigation management and operations, winter season services, and native grass services. So those are kind of all of the service scopes within that line item. The next one, covenant control and inspections. That is the community management company, currently MSI. They do weekly inspections, covenant control. They do landscape inspections for initial landscaping, make sure new homeowners are getting that in. Any type of exterior change, it requires DRA approval. So they put those packages together, they submit it to our group for approval or for consideration. And then like what they'll do is once we approve as the design review committee. They go back out and inspect to make sure what we approved on the plans is actually what got installed on the individual properties. So those are the services on that line item. Irrigation repairs is anything from a main line break to clogged nozzles on individual sprinkler heads. It includes lateral lines, clocks, controllers, everything that is in the district's overall irrigation system. Snow removal, we've got a snow removal map that we can put up on the website so that people can see what the district's responsible for versus what the town is responsible for. So we can get that up there so people can take a look at it and see what all goes into that specific number. Plant material replacement, we don't have anything in the budget this year. We've gone over kind of what would go in those other repairs and maintenance items. That's just kind of a catch-all line item where, I mean, it could be anything, the wind blows a monument sign down, you don't have that line item in a budget. So, this particular line item is where all of those kind of one-off unique situations would come into play, again, depending on the amount. Then the COVID-19 expenses, those will be offset by the relief funds that we've secured from the state. So what we did in this year is I coded everything that was COVID-19 related to contingency because we obviously didn't have any other line item for something as crazy as this. So now we do. Utilities, we broke this one out for utilities under this district operations and maintenance would be water and electric for the irrigation system predominantly. And we broke out the clubhouse and the pool utilities as well, so that we can track as we grow as the district, we can keep an eye on utilities and make sure that they're not getting out of control on the irrigation side. And then repairs and maintenance, there's no dollars in there for proposed for 2021. So is there any questions on more detail of district operations and maintenance line items?
So one quick question. So the holiday lights have been completely removed out, it looks like. So just I want to make sure that gets communicated out to the community that next year, because I know that's been a big touching point every year, is that we have some type of competition for Collar Hills, but it looks like we completely removed that line item. And then once again, just kind of go back to the playground. I know we're kind of aging on that equipment. What risks do we currently hold, Jerry, if a child is on that playground? We currently have scrapped maintenance on that piece. I know we've kind of weighed in that, we can take and do it, but if we don't have a line item specifically calling out maintenance and show that we've had a maintenance plan on that, what risk do we hold as a district on that?
So that's more of a legal question, but I can answer it. From our perspective, we did get all the equipment audited this year and repaired. So anything that came up in the audit as something that needed to be addressed, we have got that taken care of this year. So we should be good on playground equipment for a couple of years, but we'll get it audited again on an annual basis.
Yeah, and from a legal standpoint, I mean, your liability for injuries, torts, is capped by the Governmental Immunity Act unless it's one of these specific instances where there's a waiver. I don't think fund equipment would fall under one of those waivers, but even if it did, it would, usually the standard is that you have a maintenance plan, and what Jerry's reporting is you do have a maintenance plan and you are following that and making sure that it's audited and you're getting things corrected. So your risk is minimal.
All right, good deal. Just want to make sure on that piece. And then I know you talked about the monument maintenance and how they're starting to reach that point to where they actually need true maintenance applied to them. Can you remind me, did your phase 1 have that in there, or phase 2 for that monument maintenance?
Phase 1 had 50%. Phase 2 had the other 50%.
All right. Good deal.
I just wanted to jump in quickly too. Jerry, my notes show that the holiday lights are included in that other repairs and maintenance. Is that a true
Okay.
statement?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
was all
have
the
that
same
detail
thing.
sheet in front of me, so.
I don't think we were taking away holiday lighting. or plan to reduce that. I think it was in there. So
Can
I
that be
don't recall
pulled
the
out?
exact number.
Yeah, can that be pulled out into its own line item just so, once again, for tracking pieces? I remember Brandon and Kelly, you guys were very heavy on that split out. I think it's still kind of vital to have that split out. So,
Mhm.
just would really like to kind of see that again because I know we rolled a few things up and having that split out makes it definitely a lot easier to understand where we are and track year to year.
Yeah, no, I think we should do that.
Jerry, I do just have a quick question on the phased approach. Looking at the three large items that I'm looking at that have kind of been pulled out and deferred are tree replacements, the landscape enhancements, and the plant replacement. Combined, those are close to $250,000-$300,000. When was the last time we spent a meaningful amount of money on any of those three items?
We spend a meaningful amount of money on tree replacements every single year. I can go back through the previous couple of years and get those numbers for you. We've spent some money on the mulch beds, predominantly in the park areas a couple of years ago. But yeah, trees is, we spend money on trees every year.
Okay. I just recall from previous discussions, these are areas where you've requested money in the budget in prior years, and they've either been removed or deferred. And
and kind of to go along with that is, the money that we do get in the budget for plant material replacement, it typically is insufficient to replace any shrubs because we always have to use it all up on trees. So it has been, a few years or more than a few years since we did any, substantial shrub replacement around the community.
And those needs for increased budgets in those areas have been previously communicated to the district board, correct?
Yeah.
I guess my point in all of that is that I understand the phased approach. I think that's absolutely necessary going forward. But there hasn't been a phased approach applied in the past, and that is resulting in some pretty significant deferral of expenses that the longer we defer those and the further out we phase those, the greater the burden we shift over to the residents to take responsibility for that.
I do have one question. I don't have a printed up copy with me, so I can't see the top of the columns there. But for the covenant control and inspections, is that a jump from last year to the next year of $9,000? And if so, can you just explain to me why that's such a big jump?
So covenant control from 2020 was at 38.5 and it's been reduced to 35. So it actually decreased from year to year.
Okay, that's why I couldn't see the top, so I wasn't sure which column I was looking at. That was my mistake. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yep.
I have a question. It's Sam. I noticed that the snow removal for the clubhouse budget is almost the same as the snow removal budget for the entire community. $10,000 of difference. That seems rather disparate between the two. And can someone rationalize that budget for me?
So the snow removal for the clubhouse is 10,000. The snow removal for the rest of the community is 50,000.
Okay, then I am reading. Okay,
You might be
I'm
a
sorry.
line
I was
off.
looking at that $40,000 number. My bad.
That's okay.
And well, since we kind of that kind of leads into that clubhouse piece, a few questions I did kind of have on that. Looking at it, it looks like we split out the facilities management versus the clubhouse operation maintenance. Is that correct?
Yes.
So originally that was at 80,000, and now we're at 56. So close to that. So that's fine. But things that I saw kind of pulled out of there are the clubhouse management at 50,000's been completely pulled out, or 35,000. Clubhouse events at 3,500. Electrical repairs and plumbing repairs have all been pulled out from that clubhouse. Is that a correct assumption?
So
No.
certain things have moved around
And
as
been
we were
consolidated.
yeah, and consolidated. And then, so I think the majority of the decrease that you're going to see once you total those numbers up in those categories is the same type of thought process that we did in the other section, which is, if we have, a major system like a pump heater that's going to be $9,000 go down, that's more of a capital conversation than it is to put in a maintenance budget.
Okay. So, and looking at that then, I mean, so we say that it's been moved around. So I can see that general repairs went from 5,000 to $10 or to 10,000. So an increase of $5,000 in that general repairs. Plumbing repairs was marked at 6,000 by itself, and electrical repairs was marked at 5,000. So I mean, that's grand right there. That's or 11,000 that's kind of missing on that piece. The clubhouse events, where did that get moved to? What would that fall into?
Clubhouse events is now in operations and maintenance.
Oh, so that got moved into operation. So that's still 3,500. That piece that's been taken out. And what about clubhouse
We may want
management?
to separate that line item. That may be something that we separate.
Okay. Yeah, I think it'd probably be good to keep those separated again, like we spoke earlier. And then what about the 35,000 for clubhouse management? Where did that move into?
So that was reduced, and now that is under the facilities management.
Facilities management.
Yep.
All right. And then pool scheduling system and pool signage and pool equipment and repairs maintenance have all looked like they've been pulled out as well.
Those got moved. Let me just find those got moved into the pool operations and maintenance.
All right. So I see that the pool maintenance budget went up by 5,000. It was originally 25,000. It's now 30. But between the pool scheduling system at 11,500, the pool signage at 500, and then pool equipment repair at 12,000, that still doesn't cover that $5,000 increase in pool maintenance.
So the pool repair, that 12,000 that you're talking about, that shifted into the capital repairs and replacements.
So it's still, either which way it's in one of those repairs replacements, both those rounded up numbers are still less than what was originally there, though. Right. So I guess I'm trying to figure out how did we come out into less in those line items, and then why did we round up, like the scheduling, the pool scheduling system is a net new item for us starting this last year with COVID. Why are we rounding that up into an operation maintenance? Like, shouldn't we still break that out into its own category or into its own line item so we can track that year to year as well?
Well, Jason, I think the approach was, first of all, I think to just make sure that we are appropriately putting budget dollars that we feel comfortable with, I guess, for all the repairs. And, some items we actually, were able to reasonably bring down, and others we consolidated, I guess, what made sense. So I think we tried to strike the balance there.
Yep. Yeah, and once again, I'm just trying to make sure that we can explain things out to the community correctly. So that's kind of the reason I'm hitting those points. A few other items I see missing are grounds repairs, or like they've been moved. The grounds maintenance at 9,005. Or no, never mind, that one's there. Let's see here. The plant replacement for the clubhouse is $500 short if that did get rolled up into another item. And then the janitorial service, where did that end up going for the clubhouse?
That went into operations and maintenance. And the grounds replacements is still there. That's in the clubhouse landscape repairs and replacements at 3,500.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I would definitely highly recommend breaking out, once again, that operation maintenance piece, just maybe having sub items, having that head title, but breaking out underneath what it actually kind of has into it, just so we can have that justification to the community of what is there, what is not there. Would be really nice for that piece of it.
Okay.
Well, and Jason, one of the ways that happens is as invoices are paid and reports are made, you can see the breakdown as a board member.
No, we don't. We have never been given access to those invoices. Can we have access to those actually?
It's all transparent, my friend. So
okay.
That's absolutely.
How does board one get access to that data?
We'll talk about what's the most logical way to do that. But I mean, look, I've been doing this a long time, and that's a typical, you want to see how facility management or clubhouse operations and maintenance is is being allocated or used on any given month. We tie those back to monthly expenditures related to invoicing, and then we can report it out. So I'm speaking as as a fellow board member, but as someone who's done public budgeting for a long time, that's a pretty standard ask, and we're happy to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what Kelly was saying there. Every invoice is paid in these government entities is available publicly. Every regular board meeting that the district has, there's a summary of each and every invoice that's paid by that district that gets approved either in advance or accepted in arrears by the board members. Those are all attached to the board packets. I think the easiest way to get you any of that information you'd like it would be to look at the board packets. And to the extent that there's an invoice you want to look at, we got to be careful, right? Because we don't want to spend a lot of expensive time from our accountants pulling invoices. But if there's something that's really important that you'd like to look at on an individual invoice basis, all that information is available.
Well, I think both as a community member and a board member, like having that data easily accessible will be very key on that side of it. So I mean, if we have access to it on this piece of it, I would definitely like to know how to easily access it and review it. I mean, Board 1 does not get Board 4's meeting packets. Board 4's info actually doesn't, I don't think, go to anyone in the community, does it, Jennifer?
So it's a public meeting packet. I think last year we actually sent the meeting packet for the annual meeting to all the district board members at the same time. I mean, obviously, if District 4 is meeting at a time that District 1 is not meeting, I try not to inundate your inboxes with meeting packets for meetings you're not attending. But they're open. I mean, those are open records. Those are open to anybody in the community, any other board member.
Okay. Yeah.
Just ask. We have no reason to hold them back.
Yeah. And sorry, while I have everyone's attention, it is 3:23. We do have a hard stop at 3:30. So I'm going to suggest that we decide how we want to continue this meeting. And then use the last couple of minutes to go over any other line items, but just being sensitive of that 3:30 hard stop.
Personally, I would like to ask for a little bit more breakdown in that budget, and then I would also really, really appreciate a statement from Oakwood that comes out with the packet as well, or the budget itself, that says objectively how they got to that 200,000. We still need to decide where that 90,000 is going to come from, and I don't think that can be done today with the limited amount of time that we have into it. But I think those would be good starting points for our next part of this meeting. I know we're stuck between a rock and a hard place, but that would be my recommendations.
So we do have
Jennifer, I'd like to make a recommendation that we continue the meeting.
Okay.
I would second that.
So when our budget hearings have been set and published for November 17th. So we have like 2.5 weeks until the budget hearing date. That doesn't mean that we have to have a final budget necessarily by that day. So do you think the end of next week or maybe the beginning of the week of November 9th would give enough time to get some more breakdown?
Yeah, I was kind of thinking like around the 12th. Does that give everybody enough time?
Yeah.
I'm not going to be around, but I'm gone the 11th, 12th, 13th, and 14th. So
we can go to the
What
beginning
about
of
the 10th?
Oh yeah, we can't go to the beginning of the following week. What did you say our date was? November 17th? Is that right, Jennifer?
November 7th. Yeah, November 17th is the budget hearing.
Okay.
So would like November 10th splitting the difference?
That doesn't work. My 10th, 11th.
I won't be around the 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th either. That week's, yeah.
Well, the other choice we have available to us, because the actual budgets are due on December 15th, is to continue this conversation at our official budget meeting on the 17th.
17th.
And if necessary, continue that to a subsequent date before the 15th, so as to, to finalize the budgets. Or I don't know if it's more appropriate, Jennifer, to continue this meeting to the 17th, and we can open and continue the meeting on the 17th to a subsequent date. However you'd like to do that.
The 17th is already set and published as a separate meeting. So yeah, I think if we can just adjourn this meeting then and just hold the meeting on the 17th and have our public hearings, that doesn't mean that we have to adopt a budget that day. And then if things are not resolved at the end of the 17th, then we can continue that meeting as needed. I think that's the
Jennifer, how does that
plan.
relate to the fact that we're actually doing sort of a joint meeting here, whereas on the 17th, we'd be doing individual board meetings. The dates all work fine. I just want to make sure we follow the appropriate protocol, whether we continue this meeting and then open and close, or open and continue that meeting and then finish this one on, or whether we close this meeting and do what we need to on the 17th with that meeting that's published.
Yeah, I think we'll just close out this meeting today. The 17th is, I mean, we're all meetings are set concurrently. It's not set as a joint meeting, but they're all set concurrently. So practically speaking, it will be a joint meeting. So we can just continue all of those meetings, which is basically how we're handling this anyway. So I think it's form over substance. We are set from a legal standpoint. So I would suggest, to give enough time, that the working group continue to work through some of these items. And I know, Jason, you're actively a participant on that. So I think having you be in communication with CLA on some more of these breakdowns and working with the sort of working group that was put together, I think that makes sense if that works for everybody.
With that, unless there's an objection from any of the other board members, I'd move that we close this meeting and continue the conversation on the 18th.
I would second that.
17th.
So, yeah, the 17th.
17th, sorry.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So that is a motion by Bruce, second by Kelly. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All right. And sorry, I hate to cut a conversation short, but today we have a hard stop that is a hard stop. So we will
Okay.
continue this at 4 o'clock on the 17th, and I'm sure there'll be continued discussions between now and then. So thank you,
Appreciate
everybody.
everybody's efforts.
Yep. Yep.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.